Welcome back to the World News. Now the deal is through, but already the criticisms have begun. The UN Climate Change Conference is where we turn next. In Copenhagen, world leaders signed a deal, but US Secretary General Ban Ki-moon admits that the Copenhagen Accord could be a disappointment for some. He describes it nonetheless as an essential beginning, as Lee Chong brings us the latest on that.
There was spontaneous applause as the climate conference's plenary session president, Philippe Huich, announced parties attending the climate conference agreed to note the Copenhagen Accord. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says it is a step in the right direction, although he agreed the accord may not be everything that everyone had hoped for.
All countries have agreed to work toward a common long-term goal to limit global temperature rise to below 2 degrees Celsius. Many governments have made important commitments to reduce or limit emissions.
The accord is a non-binding deal for combating global warming. Ban highlights 3 tests that lay before world leaders: turning the agreement into a legally binding treaty, the launch of the Copenhagen Green Climate Fund, and finally pursuing the road of higher ambition.
Current mitigation commitments fail to meet the scientific bottom line. We still face serious consequences. So while I am satisfied that we have a deal here in Copenhagen, I am aware that it is just the beginning.
The 193 nations stopped short of a full endorsement of the plan. It sets a target of limiting global warming to a maximum 2 degrees Celsius rise over pre-industrial times, and holds out the prospect of $100 billion in annual aid from 2020 for developing nations. The plan does not specify greenhouse gas cuts needed to achieve the 2 Celsius goal, which is seen as a threshold for dangerous climate changes. Lee Chong, CCTV.
As we said earlier, criticism is growing after world leaders at the UN Climate Conference in Copenhagen only noted a non-binding accord. Many countries are walking away disappointed, as Yang Wei-han tells us.
It was a disappointing day for those who had anticipated a legally binding treaty to curb carbon emissions would be reached. Environmentalists and non-governmental organizations have criticized the Copenhagen Accord as meaningless spin.
It was very close to not having any agreement at all. We ended up with the Conference of the Parties then noting that there was an agreement made yesterday among 25 countries, but it didn't actually agree to what those 25 countries agreed yesterday.
But some world leaders are downplaying the criticism and opposition and have expressed optimism.
And there was some objections, not from many countries, but from quite a few. And we overcome that obstacle because now it is entirely up to the countries to sign up for this. I predict, as my colleague, that many countries will sign up for this.
Much of the disappointment came from developing countries, who are the most vulnerable to the effects of global climate change.
Obviously, we're disappointed that the total outcome of the meeting didn't lead to any legal forms of text or outcomes that we were hoping for at this meeting.
Frustration was clearly evident on the streets of Copenhagen on Saturday. But many are still hoping that there will be a chance in the near future to turn back the effects of climate change and save the planet. Yang Wei-han, CCTV.